Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Today's episode of Legal Tea is the Cautionary Tales topic. And on these episodes of Legal Tea, we normally talk about real life cases with real life clients that are things me or my office have worked on, or they are things that I think are just generally good things to be aware of so that you do not turn into a cautionary tale on this podcast one day. So today may feel and sound a little bit different because today is not about like a single client or a single case, but instead a very, very common trend amongst a group of clients that me here in Indiana routinely serve. And who is that group of clients, you ask? Farmers and farm families. What inspired this episode was an article in a newspaper called Farm World. If you live in the Midwest and are affiliated at all in the ag community, you've heard of the Farm World newspaper. To be clear, my husband, Justin, is the one that gets the paper. I can't take credit for signing up for it. Justin was a farm kid growing up, and now even today we live out in the country on a small little farm and have cattle. I had a client say once that after I had shared with them that we have cattle, they were like, hey, you have a farmette, like a little mini farm. And I was like, yeah, kind of. So yeah, that is why we get Farm World. Justin genuinely is interested in many of the topics that they cover, but routinely there's an article that he has me read, and that happened. And it's an article that inspired me to do this episode. So I, of course, have a link to the article in the source links for this episode if you care to check it out. You can just kind of consider this episode like a Jenny version summary of that article. Now, if you've been following along on Legal Tea, like I said just a minute ago, I am from Indiana, and I practice law here in Indiana. My main office is actually in the city. It's not out in the middle of nowhere, but you know, when many think of this awesome state that I live in, they think of corn and beans and animals and farming. And I guess we are in the Midwest after all. But my office has 3 offices. That we have that main office in the county that borders our capital. So like I said, it's not rural. But ironically, we do live in this county that I'm talking about, and we live in this small portion of the county that is still rural. Our other 2 offices are in much more rural counties, and as a byproduct of that, we have many, many clients that are farmers and farm families, and trust me, they 100% need an attorney like us that only does this estate and elder law work. So today's episode is what I'm going to call it the why so many farmers and farm families completely fail to plan their estate and fail to plan, to pass the farm down. A very large percentage of farmers, according to that article, to the tune of 75%, fail to have a succession plan in place for the farm. And in my experience, and also as the article suggests, there are a variety of reasons farmers and farm families fail to plan. And most I'd consider to be our excuses. So let's chat about what those reasons are and why I think that they are merely excuses. So the first reason is they want to be fair. And if I did a video recording of me, I just did fair with air quotes. Now, inevitably, this comes up so often. The kids or whoever the beneficiaries are all over the place. And what I mean by that is usually 1 or 2 may help on the farm. And there is usually one at least that also have no desire to take over the farm and has not been participating in the farm operation for a very long time. So for this reason, many farmers feel the need or the desire to sort of pave the way for the farm kid to take over when they want to retire or when they pass. But they don't want to say it out loud because what about the non-farming kids? One of my favorite things I say routinely to clients, whether we're talking about farming or whether we're talking about running a business, is that sometimes fair is not always equal. This is not an earth-shattering idea. So for example, the kid helping on the farm consider that they are putting in significantly more sweat equity into that farm than the kid not helping on the farm at all. Is it fair to give that kid or kids more or all of the farm? Perhaps. Will things be equal at the end? Probably not. But remember, fair is not always equal. Now, beneath this reason or excuse is usually fear. They don't want to make the one that's not in the farm operation mad. And I get that. So often families, when talking about when their kids or beneficiaries inherit, they think that treating them equal means you love them equally. And if you give one more, you love that one more. Just stop that thinking. This is your plan. You're in the driver's seat, and you should do what you want to do, period. End of story. Reason number 2 is the cost, and that is the legal fees. And okay, I get it. I don't like spending money either. But when it comes to important stuff, I don't question it. So for example, we have a very, me personally, me and my husband have a very highly qualified, highly experienced CPA accountant that does all things taxes for us. He's not cheap, but it's the peace of mind and knowing that he's the best in the business and doing the right thing. That's priceless. I would much rather pay him to do a good job than get in trouble with the IRS. And it's the same thought process here. Professionals come with fees, yes, and they're not going to be cheap, but will they be worth it? For sure. So if you're working with a good, reputable, qualified professional, know that there are going to be fees, but in all likelihood, those fees will be worth it. The article mentioned something hilarious. I actually laughed out loud when I read it, so I'm going to mention it here. It said, remember, a large floater tire for a spreader, combine, or other implement can easily run $6,000 to $8,000. If the legacy of your farm is not worth the price of one tire, I would question how committed you are to that legacy, end quote. If that's not the most mic drop moment for this episode, I don't know what is. And little insider secret on this, sometimes hiring professionals, especially if you operate your farm truly as a business entity, could also mean you could write off some of that fee on your taxes. So if you're looking for an incentive, maybe there's a little nugget for you. Reason number 3 is the overwhelm, like where to begin. I often say the hardest part of estate planning is starting the process. So often when a prospective client ends up in our conference room, they are very likely moving forward with some sort of plan. That's because making the original appointment, that took a lot of courage. And it sounds silly, but it's not. From there, the conversation flows, the ideas flow, and we just get moving through the process. So the whole idea of, I don't know where to begin, reason, excuse, let this be the end of that. The where to begin is getting the conversation started by making an appointment. And from there, don't hem and haw, keep moving forward. And one thing I've heard along these same lines is that sometimes people do not know who to call. Again, I sometimes think that's an excuse too. Ask around to your fellow farmer friends. Ask them if they've done their estate planning. If they have, who'd they use? Do they feel that attorney did a good job? If they have not, ask others. In our rural offices, a very common referral to us is from other farm families. You know, the Smiths took the initiative to do their estate plan and realized we know what the heck we're doing. And then the Smiths told the Collins family, and then the Collins family told the Thomas family, and the Thomases and the Smiths told the Forrest family, et cetera, et cetera. So just like we talked about, we always talk about this on this podcast. Check your referrals. Check your referrals that you get from family and friends, and just make sure that you do your homework. And whether that's, looking them up online to see what kind of reviews they have or whatever, do your homework. And that homework should lead you to a good place. Reason number 4 is just procrastination, putting it off. Now, one thing I routinely hear from clients is, okay, Jenny, if I die, and oftentimes I'll stop them in their tracks and I'll say, if, you mean when? Unless someone out there has some secret magic potion, we're all going to pass away. And the somewhat icky thing about doing what I do for a living is I see and hear a lot of cruddy stuff, guys. 30-year-olds who have passed away, 40-year-olds who have had strokes, 50-year-olds get diagnosed with dementia. Life, as we all know, is short, and it is not guaranteed, and not even guaranteed for a long time. So if we know we are going to pass away, but not sure when, why would you keep putting this off? Especially you farm families. Sadly, there are many accidents in farmings too. You work with some heavy machinery. There are grain bin accidents. You're often on the road going between different tracks. You work early mornings. You work late nights, meaning you're sleepy and perhaps more prone to accidents. Now, along these lines, a big reason we help farm families too is to protect the family farm against long-term care and Medicaid. It is possible, but the best plan is one that is done proactively and not in the 11th hour. So it's possible to do 11th hour emergency planning, but it's not the best plan. There are always going to be options, but the more proactive that you are from a planning perspective, the better those options are going to be. So yeah, I don't want to scare you with all this procrastination talk, but at the same time, get a move on it. And reason number 5, this is our last one, is operation, I'm just going to do nothing. The old, the kids can just figure it out when I die. Well, that is a legitimate option, I guess, on the table. But why on earth is that the best option? It's not. You worked your tail off to be in the position you are in, and you are not going to pick the best option on the table. I'm certain you would rather your kids and beneficiaries get the farm rather than the lawyers and IRS who get to pick up any pieces that you left for your family. And if your people start fighting, it's a bad day for your estate, and it's a good day for an estate litigator. This is not rocket science. You either clean it up and do things now, or it gets cleaned up later and likely at a much higher cost. Now, I know much of this episode has been kind of tongue-in-cheek and maybe a little sarcastic maybe too sarcastic for some. I'm honestly just trying to keep the topic light and at the same time call your attention that so many, if not all, of the reasons that we hear from farmers on not doing any estate planning, they're just silly excuses. One of my favorite things to say in the world is we are a product of our choices. And I firmly believe that. So you can choose to do planning or you can choose to not do your estate planning. But there are sure way more downfalls about the not doing planning, at least in my personal and professional opinion. Alrighty, let's wrap up this episode and shift to a sneak peek at next week, which we will be circling back to the current trends topic where we talk about things that are going on currently that impact my estate and elder law world. On next week's episode, we're going to talk about the Slayer's Rule. And I'm sure you're like, what the heck did she just say? Well, funny enough, there was a recent Taylor Swift song, and she somewhat casually mentioned something that I'm like, you know what? That would be fun. A fun way to talk about the Slayer's Rule. So a Taylor Swift song is what inspired our next week's episode, my friends. You'll just have to tune in. So until then, Legal Tea listeners, be well and talk soon.